Okay, welcome to the next lesson. And in this lesson, we're going to finalize the modes which we have covered so far, and then go for the rest of the properties that you see in the properties panel. I know this might seem a little bit daunting at first, but when you get the hang of it and do a couple of projects using these settings, you're going to pick them up as you go. But it's necessary to learn the tools and learn the possibilities that sp3 gives us to create foliages and trees. Okay, the next mode is going to be the interval. And this one has also its own specific settings. And it's no different than what we have covered so far. And as the name suggests, it's going to place these nodes, the children's, alongside the body of the parent. And also the children's are going to adapt the size of the parent. For example, if I resize the parent, in this case this trunk, the more we make this bigger, the bigger the branches are going to be. So let me bring this back. And it's going to place the children's based on these two values, the first and the last. So to get the default one, let me delete these branches and again bring this branch and make the mode interval. So this is what the default interval gives us. The previous one, we really changed some of the settings and it was randomized and not really showing the defaults that it does. So you see, it places the children's in groups. And as you see, it places the children's, these branches, on the groups, and of course a bit randomized to cover most of the foliage creation process. And it's going to limit the generation of the nodes or these children's to the first and last, and by the frequency value. For example, if I try to increase the frequency, you see we're not getting something in here because the first and last have clamped that. So if I increase that and bring up the first, it's trying to clamp that. And also using the last as well, let me bring the last down also. Now it's really trying to clamp that value that we have there. And because we are using some mid values, we are only getting the children's spawned in the center of the tree. And this frequency, you should remember that it tells how many groups should be created. And let me go a couple of steps back so that we get the default first and last. And now let's put in here, for example, 5. And the number is also relative, not exact, just like what we have previously covered. And if you set 5, it's not really adding 5. It's a frequency, how often, not the exact value. And that is really subjective value, and you can manipulate that using this first and last as well. And then there's this curve that you have here. And let me take them to see what the effect is. If you bring this down, there are going to be more and more created, and this is the spacing between them. This should not be considered as the frequency. This is the spacement, the space between the groups that are generated. And if I bring this up and increase the space, you see this has gone up and we have a lot more space in between them, resulting in generating lesser and lesser branches of the tree. And this count enables us to control the children's in each group. So now it's 4, we have 4 children in each group, you see them here. And if I make it 1, let me make it 1, and now we are getting 1 children in each group. And if I make it 2, we are getting 2, 3, 4, and this number, I can say that the number is exact, is absolute number, not a relative number. And of course, the sweep and a spread for randomization, and a spiral, you know how the spiral effect is going to be. And of course, this limit is going to limit how many groups we are creating. For example, now the 1000 is very much. If I set it to 1, it limits the creation to only 1 group. And if I set it to 2, it's going to let us create a couple of groups. And if I make it 3, it's going to make it 3 groups. And the remaining option is this balance. Let me go to the top view or exactly to the top view using this X and Y plane, and look at when I activate the balance. It tries to fill these gaps when we look at them from the above, to fill these empty spaces. And it's going to be subjective per tree. It's going to look at the empty spaces. You see there are some empty spaces in here, and this is going to balance that, basically normalize that. So let's go to perspective, and this is for interval, pretty common to use, and it's going to really cover a lot of the foliages and trees and grasses, bushes, and a lot of things that you might create. Okay, the next mode is the bifurcation, and again, to get the default settings, I'm going to delete this and add the branches and set the mode to bifurcation to get the default settings in here. This mode is going to use the crevices and the bends and irregularities of the parent model to recreate the splitting shape. So for these ones, let me bring another type of branch. Let me bring some big branches, and I need to select them to here. And you see we have some big branches in here. Let me hide these by using H, and I want to decrease the frequency just a little bit. And I'm going to select these branches and connect them to these big branches so that these big branches are the parents of these smaller branches that we have here. And I'm going to set the mode to bifurcation, which is the default one. And it's going to use the crevices and the bendings on the model to place the nodes. And you see it has created some splitting part effects that you see on the trees, and it's going to be a lot more naturalistic than some others to use and create the branch splits, just like what you see in here. And you see, for example, in here, see the branch has been split to a couple of parts. And to visualize the bifurcation, I can visualize that here. For example, we have the main branch, and then we have a couple of branches, big branches coming off after that. And then on these we have two branches. And on this one as well we have two branches. And on each of these we have a couple of branches. Same as this one and same as this last one. And then on these we have two branches more. And it's going to create this tree effect for us, where we have the main branch going to a smaller branch and a smaller branch, just what happens in nature in a lot of tree situations. And this threshold value is going to make it harder or easier for the children to be a spawn on the parent. For example, if I set the threshold to be so low, we're going to get the most, and if I set the threshold to be so high, it's going to be harder for it to find some places to place the trees on. And you see it's only adding the branches to the crevices, to the bends. For example, we have a bend in here and it has created the branches for us. And if you increase the threshold even more, you're getting less and lesser branch splits. For now, you see in here there's a radical change and it has placed the branch for us. And the more you increase the threshold, the lesser branches you're going to get. So be careful with that, it's reversed. And the spacing is also the spacing between the branches, and it's not going to shift them around. It's not going to add randomness. It's going to delete some of them and keep those ones that are really placed on the harder areas. For example, it's not spawning them on this flat area, instead on these bend areas. And this is really what happens in nature in a lot of trees. And then again we have the balance, and this balance is going to make it something like a spiral. For example, the balance 0 means no balance. It's going to keep those that keep a spiral shape. And if you keep the balance so high, it's going to remove some of them, and only keeping those that shape a spiral around the bigger branch that it's attached to. And the next one, let me delete these smaller branches. The next one is going to be the flood. And it has some smaller options. It has absolute and relative. If you use absolute, for example, you hit 2, you're getting only 2 branches. But if you set it to be 1 and make the relative, for example, something like 1, you're getting the amount based on the size of the parents. So it really depends on you to watch what you want to create. And in this example, I'm going to create, for example, 72 instances of that branch, and we have the parent controls in here to tell it on which parts we want these to be generated. This is good for some random object creation to fill some gaps or fill some areas in. So let's go in here, and for the preset, let's go for bell. Max is going to disable all of them, and using this you can really fine-tune the control of placement of them. And the next mode is parent, which I haven't really found a use case for it. And it's going to create some branches or basically a lot of nodes in the origin of the parent. For example, if I bring a trunk and this trunk is added into here, and if I set that one to be parent, it's going to always make it in the center and based on the values that you give it. I really haven't found any use case for this one, but as I said, if we find a use case for it, we will show and demo it for you. So this was for the modes and the generation tab. We have covered pretty much a lot of the things that we need to know for the basic usages. And now it's time to move on to these also other tabs that we have in here in the property bar. You see there are a lot of them. If you hit all, you're getting a lot of them, but we are going to cover them one by one. And the next one is going to be the spine tab or the forces tab.